Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, all the stuff. That's how we get the word out. I'm excited for our guest today, Alex. I don't know, we're talking about how to introduce him. Really tall guy. He's one of the nicest guys you've ever met. But he has a company in Neuromarketing, which is really cool. He started it in 2018, but he's been in the online marketing and all paid ads and all that kind of stuff for over a decade. So really excited. I know you guys are getting a lot of value today. Thank you so much for being on. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully we can make this a really good informational podcast for people and a little bit funny too.
I like the both. That's a great combination. So tell us a little bit about what got you into neuromarketing, because that's kind of your specialty, which is kind of a niche market. Yeah. And what does that mean?
Really good question. So I'll go back a little bit further than me starting my agency. So my background's in neuroscience and psychopharmacology, which are just really, really complicated words for drugs that affect the brain and what makes us think through function and action. So that's what my background was in. My senior year of college, I had a near-death experience. I was on track to become a neurosurgeon. And because of those heart issues and because of what had ended up transpiring, all my advisors, all my educators had essentially said, there's no way you'll ever get your insurance to actually go and perform neurosurgery because they can't count on your heart not malfunctioning again. So I said, okay, so life pivot. I was really depressed after that and really trying to find a way through life. And I ended up starting to do jujitsu and Muay Thai. And because I'm 6'5" and 225, it's a lot of fun, but it was also, I got paired up with people that were 340, 350. And just based off of size, I ended up sparring with them. And one of the guys that I ended up sparring with threw a kick and ended up cracking one of my floating ribs, which is one of the lower ones on the body. And he was like, hey, man, really sorry about that. I know that hurts really bad. Like, come to my flotation therapy center that I'm opening up in the next few weeks. The tanks are there. They're full. We're just not ready to go live yet. So I said, okay. So I'd heard about floating on Rogan, but I'd never tried it at all in my life. So I went, fell in love with it. And I was like, I don't have a job right now besides part-time work here and there. It looks like you need help. Do you mind me working here? And in exchange, I get to kind of float and heal my ribs and kind of get my mental health straight too. So we did that. And about 3 months into it, we're sitting down having vodka tonics one night. And he was like, by the way, we're about a few months away from going completely out of business. I truly didn't understand how many people I needed to have here in order to make it work. And I said, okay, well, let me start learning about digital marketing. So I went deep into SEO, into paid ads. And as I was learning about the psychology behind marketing and why people buy what they buy, I was like, well, this is everything I learned in all my psych and neuroscience classes around how humans think, how we behave, what we need to overcome in order to see change in ourselves. And I fell in love with it. And then as I started to go through, I learned more and more about the niche of neuromarketing or consumer neuroscience. Within about 18 months, we brought them from a $100,000 in debt business to a $2.2 million a year revenue. We opened up multiple locations. And during that time, I was paid $8.25 an hour while I brought him in literally millions of dollars. He bought himself a new Mercedes. Mom got a G-Wagon. Dad got a new F-250. And I'm still living in my mom's basement. And I'm like, this isn't cool. She's about to throw me out. My girlfriend's down here saying, what's going on? Like, you're bringing in all this money for this guy and you're making nothing and you're working crazy long hours at 39 hours a week, plus the overtime that you're putting in just to learn all this stuff. So I said, okay, you're right. So I went out and 2016, I left there, started up a new venture that failed. And I was like, why don't I just go back to what I know, which is marketing, advertising, SEO, and specifically the niche of neuromarketing. So January 1st of 2018, I made the resolution that I was going to start a business and I was going to see it through for at least 3 years. And as of January of this year, we're past the 5-year mark.
That's so cool, man. That's like a lot of story in a very short amount of time. And so for listeners listening, a couple of things I really want you to pay attention on. First of all, there was a major thing that happened in Alex's life that really shook him. And we'll touch on that a little bit more. But then instead of using that as a crutch, he started to use it as something to get out, and he started to do something physical. Physical activity helps a lot of mental. Started to do something physical, saw an opportunity with his flotation, took it and ran with it, and then helped this person out in a big way. And through that, he learned a whole bunch that he wouldn't have learned otherwise. So while this guy made millions, thankfully, Alex learned how to make millions also, and is doing that. But, sometimes we just use the obstacles. So tell us a little bit about that near-death experience and what kind of happened and what transpired, because I really want to go back to that.
Yeah. So this is way pre-pandemic. I was 22 and I got I had a myocarditis attack where my heart just overinflamed and the top of my aorta actually ripped off the rest of the heart. So internal bleeding, severe drop in blood pressure. And I was actually at a Starbucks meeting up with some of my bandmates because I've been playing guitar for now 16 and a half, 17 years. And that was the only band I've ever been a part of. I just like playing. And they heard me playing because I would play out on the roof of my college house. We had this down slanted roof, and I would just sit out there and play because my bedroom window was direct access to this down slant roof. So I had my amp and everything inside the room, and I just had my guitar out on the roof, and I was just playing. And these two twins walked by, and they were like, "You're really good. Can we just play some shows together?" And I was like, "Sure. I'm all down for that." So I was meeting them to play, and that's when that happened. And luckily, one of them was in school to become a paramedic. So if I wouldn't have been for her being right there and us being 2 blocks away from Wexner Medical Center, I probably would have died. But life happens for us, not to us, right? And all of that led to me being where I am now. But at the time, it caused a shitload of depression. I ended up trying pretty much every psychedelic drug there was out there, trying to find answers, trying to connect back to source and what that near death was, because I lost consciousness for over a minute and a half while I was under, and they didn't think I was going to live. But through that, I found flotation therapy to be the best way for me to reconnect with that. It's all about breath work. It's about kind of deactivating yourself away from your body and really trying to focus on just breath and meditation while you're in there.
Wow, so cool. I love that. And then you got into neuromarketing. Tell us a little bit about how that works. Give us some hints, tips or whatever. And obviously people can reach out to you and stuff like that. We'll have all that kind of stuff. But what are some things that people don't do that they should do, or things that they should do that they don't do in marketing?
There's a lot there. Most people think of marketing as an expense, and it's really an investment into feeding what you have coming up. So a lot of people, and especially inside of the e-commerce world, it's all about the direct response and association with what's called ROAS, or return on ad spend. And they think all I have to do is just spend more money on marketing and it's just magically going to work, right? I have to have these big budgets in order to make it work. And that's just simply not true. No matter what industry you're in, it's all about what's the emotional response you're wanting your audience to feel, and what do you want them to remember about you through that. So we're playing this kind of brain training game with our audience consistently around message, market, and product to be able to pull them back in and make them feel like that they're part of something. Ed Mylett and Tony Robbins talk about the 6 human needs. And when you start to dig into a field of empathetic marketing, how do you get our brand to feel empathetic towards our customers? How do you get them to feel like that they're memorizing our message, our cause, and why our products fit them so perfectly? A lot of that has to do with training the brain to get them to feel that message and for them to really resonate with it. Disney does a ton of stuff, and I know there's a lot of controversy around Disney right now, but Disney's really cracked the code on a lot of this. They force perspective inside of their parks. They push out sense inside of their parks. They make sure that there's constant messaging. Chick-fil-A does the same thing too here in the States, which is they repeat the same messages over and over and over again because they want you to remember something about their brand. There's a ton of different ways, especially if you walk through a mall, right? If you, especially in the United States, we have Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister, right? They pump out smells constantly Annie Ann's is a byproduct of what their product is. You can smell it the second you walk into a mall and you're instantly triggered to want to go buy that product. You can do that with direct-to-consumer products as well. You can do that with service-based businesses too. There's a ton of different senses that we can put into our marketing that allow for us to recall that experience later.
That's cool. So what are some things that, like if someone's listening to this and they're just getting off the ground, that they should like pay attention to specifically? Because there's a lot of different, obviously, aspects. What's like the first step?
The first step is to get to know your audience at a very deep level and see if your product is actually something that they want. Now that we've kind of come into very strange times here in the States, a lot of people are very gun shy about spending a lot of money right now. So you see people with like $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 coaching or consulting practices that I'm now seeing them break up that $9,000 package into $40, $50 bites that get them further down the road. They're still getting the same quick result in order to feed that dopamine loop of quick wins. I understand the content material. You're helping me solve this problem quickly. I'm just taking it in smaller bites to get down the road.
So lowering prices.
You don't necessarily have to lower pricing. There's a ton around pricing strategy. You may end up getting them to spend more with you throughout that process. But most people are so attached to their initial idea before they've ever talked to their market, before they've ever done research, before they've ever really grown an audience or built a list, that they're just kind of shooting from the hip and hoping that it works. With marketing, we're always under the assumption that what we have now is not going to work tomorrow. So by testing and constantly moving through things, it really allows us to pivot quickly because we already know, hey, this idea is not going to work tomorrow. The theory and the practice behind it's going to work. But if the audience shifts or the market shifts or their perception of your brand shifts, then we have to kind of pull back and just analyze and say, hey, I'm not attached to this specific method. I'm just attached to getting them the results that they want and need, or making them feel a certain way about our brand. How can we do that? Look at like Nokia, right? Before Nokia sold phones, they were in a totally different market. And then Nokia shifted because the market shifted. Same with Nintendo. Nintendo's the oldest gaming brand, but they didn't start out in gaming. They started out doing other things, noticed the technology that they had, and then pivoted towards where their marketplace was and where there was a hole, which was younger demographic-based gaming. Now that's their entire marketing strategy. Younger demographic, typically skews a little female, and now they're pushing in that direction heavily with what type of content and what type of games and other products they put out. And they do it at all different price ranges, where if you look at something like Xbox or PlayStation, they tend to skew heavily male and a little bit older, but their products and their product market fit skew there anyway, right? They're doing things like Call of Duty, they're doing sports gaming, they're doing franchise-based gaming, and that fits their model a lot better because they understand, hey, Nintendo's got this other market. They may have a little bit of crossover, but it's not nearly to the extent that their audience skews towards PlayStation or Xbox.
So being willing to pivot is a key also. Yeah.
Always.
Not being stuck with that. A lot of people are stuck with, think of like Kodiak and like what they're doing and being able to pivot. That's really cool. So, you've been growing this now, and I know you've done some, when you started running your own business, what was some of the feedback within your family and friends, and how did that influence you as you went into entrepreneurship? Because I know with a lot of brand new entrepreneurs, that's one of the biggest things is like, my friends don't support me, or my family doesn't support me, or whatever. And then it causes a lot of people to quit from their dreams. Did you go through that? And if you did, how did you handle it?
So at the beginning, everybody was super supportive, which is kind of counterintuitive. And as I got further down the road, that's when people started falling off.
Interesting. Okay.
But so the one person who I've had multiple people, my mom's never given up on me. My immediate family's never given up on it. I got a little bit of pushback, like, hey, like, are you sure you want to do this? But at the same time, they all said, man, like, you're 25. The worst that's going to happen is you'll fail. You'll get a little bit in debt. You can get a job and work it off if things don't go well. But at the beginning, my friends were super supportive. And to this day, my girlfriend is still my number one supporter. We've been together for 8.5 years.
Cool.
But down the road, as I started to get busier and busier, and I started to join groups like Arete Syndicate and get different mentors that are in industry and out of industry, and I started to level up who I am as a person, that's when the friction started to rub. It didn't happen instantly because I didn't feel that identity shift yet. As I got further down the road, my identity shifted heavily. That's when people started to fall off. And I took it with a grain of salt, right? They're on their own life path. I'm on mine. I know all of them are going to do what they're meant to do in this lifetime. I'm doing what I'm meant to do. And that's okay. I've met tons of new friends. I've met you along the way. I've met other amazing people that I know that if I needed something, I could call them in a heartbeat and they would answer the phone and be like, hey, what's up? What do you need? How can I help? And to me, I can't say that those old friends would have been in that position to be able to do that.
So when you went through that, and you're going through that, I mean, we continue to grow. We're definitely, that's what growth is all about, is always shifting and always changing. You went through some of that identity shifts. Tell us a little bit about like what shifted within you, and what are some tips that could help people maybe shift faster? Because I know a lot of people that are listening to this would be growth orientated. They want to shift, they want to get better. And sometimes it's like frustrating because they want to get there faster. What are some things that maybe helped you kind of start to shift that might help others?
I would say I falsely struggled with like, what is it called? It's almost like where you're disassociating from where you actually are. Imposter syndrome. Yes. I falsely struggled with that. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with somebody who was like, you don't actually struggle with that specifically. What you really struggle with is looking at where your vision is going, because you have the data points already to establish that you're no longer that person. You've already done X, Y, and Z. You just don't think back to those data points. And I had a conversation with Tony Watley once, and he was like, do you keep a victory log? And I was like, what's a victory log? And he was like, write down every time you have a win and look at things that you've done throughout your lifetime that were win. Go all the way back to your childhood. Think back as far as you can and just write out all the victories that you had. Did you win a karate tournament? Did you do really well at a sport? Did you win something, a prize randomly that was a victory for you? And as you're going through, you see the trail of success. But oftentimes our brains are so focused on that we failed at something because of how we're brought up. If you fail at something, it's a negative. Right. It was like, if you look at that as this is how you got to where you were, they're not really failures. They're just little stepping stones to get you to where you're going. And you can actually see your trajectory a lot better and a lot clearer when you're in that mode. So I started having a victory log. So anytime I have a win, I write it down in there. Every time I've done 75 hard, it's gone in there. Every time I failed 75 hard, but I've learned something, I count that as a victory too. So I've trained my brain to rethink about that, to where even if I've lost a friend, I gained those 15 years that I spent with them. Right. And I learned all these things from them.
So good. I just wrote that down, victory log. I think that's a great tip right there. If anyone's listening, try that. That sounds amazing. And it starts to program your brain to also look for the victories, which is great. Because if you're looking for it, that's what we look for. That's what we find. Yeah. So that's really cool. So that's a really interesting tip. And then, when your friends started falling off, quote unquote, or whatever you want to call it, how did you you and I both hear this and people say this all the time, man, I don't want to lose my friends, and I don't want to, that kind of thing. How did that work for you? And some of them, like for me, they just they're still my friends. We just don't really talk, just nothing really to talk about.
I've had 3 out of, dozens and dozens, right, that I had a negative encounter with around that. The rest of them have been the same way. They just fell out of the immediate contacts and went into secondary. Same thing. If I picked up the phone and we wanted to have a conversation, they would answer, but I just can't relate to them in the same way that I can relate to people that are 15, 20 years down the road from where I want to be. I can relate to them and they can relate to me a lot easier. And I'm sure they feel the same way about me. I may not be in their primary contact list, but if I called them, they would answer the phone and have a quick conversation with me and say, hey, man, I got to get back to work, or hey, I'm doing this with the family, I got to go. And that's okay. I just shifted my parameters around what my expectations are out of people. And I just don't expect a lot from people that way.
And so what are some books? What are some tips that, have helped you on your growth beyond at Victory Log, which I think is amazing? What are some books or tapes or videos or I don't know, whatever? What's some things that you think would help someone that they could do for free?
Oh, man. It really depends on what you're looking for and where you're at in life, right? Because I really think that books resonate and hit people differently. Same with podcasts and audio and everything else. They hit people differently for where you're at in life. So I think that's a really difficult question for me to answer because I don't know where people are. I don't know kind of like what you're going through in life. Books that I go back to continuously, though. My favorite is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. That to me it's a once a year read, mandatory at least. I make all my new team members read it because it's just so good at meeting you where you're at. And every time you pick it up, it's super quick. It's like 120 pages. But you go back to it every time and you're like, man, I missed that part of the story. And the other thing that I think he does very, very well is he takes super complicated ideas and makes them very simple through story. I think if you're in your business trying to learn how to do a very complex task and make it simple, he takes really hard philosophical ideas about life and journey and growth and partnership and makes it very digestible.
That's cool. I like that. Yes. And that's a really good book. So guys, if you haven't read it, check it out. It took me a while and finally I bought it. And I was like, wow, this is a really easy, simple, good read. So yeah, check that book out, The Alchemist. That's a good one. And what also like I said, whenever I think of people, I'm trying to think of, some of the people that are on here, because you've come through so much. When you were going through you're helping this guy, he's making all this money, and you weren't at the time, but you were still learning, which was awesome. What was some of your mindset through all of that? Do you remember kind of back to what was your mindset and your thoughts?
It was negative. It was definitely negative. I was super resentful. I was like, man, like I'm building you and making you great, and I'm seeing nothing in return. Right. But as I've gone through that, and now that I've got a team of more than what I ever thought I would have, it changes my perspective of how I engage with them. And our culture now is so strong, I think, because we've gone through that. Or because I went through that, and I make sure I don't ever treat my people that way. My people are almost always overpaid for their skill set for where they're at. And I train them to become better and show them that path forward. I didn't ever see a path forward. All I saw was, here's your schedule, here's your calendar, here's what I'm expecting you to do. Now go do it. And I think there's a lot, the people I attract, the people we retain, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And I'd put my staff up against anybody out there, not just on skill set, but on the mindset around our culture too.
That's really cool. What are some tips in hiring that you've used to help you build that kind of culture?
So hiring is always an interesting one, right? We're super, super forward on culture at the beginning and say, hey, we hire and fire, promote, and everything off of our core values. It's not just based on performance. Performance matters, but ultimately the decision falls into the weight of core values and how well you've lived them throughout a time period. We don't do any of that based off of length of time. It's all based off of your growth trajectory, where you want to go. Are you hitting your goals to be that person? And that's really attracted the right type of people and repelled the ones that I didn't want in here anyway. Nobody wants the people that are just going to be a cog, even though you quote unquote need them. I would argue that you don't just as much, because if you have the people that are set up with free thinking skills, cognitive abilities to be able to process information and complex problems, they're not cogs. Cogs are people that work on a manufacturing line that are doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. But if I'm training you to, while you may be doing repetitive tasks, you're seeing how this ties into bigger and better visions, how this is tying into your growth trajectory, then you're more likely to stay. You're more likely to refer the right types of people. And now we don't even have to do like recruiting, it's pretty much like, hey, we're either going to acquire another brand that fits our values, that we can really see being of value to what we do, or somebody inside of our organization is going to refer them, and we'll find a way. We'll always find a way for great people.
That's cool. I like that. Core values are really important. So anyone listening, if you don't have core values, get your core values, figure that out. Hire, fire based on core values. And culture is, really important. So in wrapping up, I always have 3 final questions, and then anything that we didn't touch on that you just think our listeners really need to hear. First final question is, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you would say that could help them find it?
If nobody was watching, what would you still be doing?
That's a good one. I like it. All right. Number 2, and I'm sure you have more than one maybe, but what comes to mind, what's your favorite quote and why?
I like Einstein's quote about doing the same thing and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. Because I see that a lot in my industry of, we're just going to spend more and still get bad results, or we're just going to keep going down this path and it's not been working. And we have all this data to suggest that it's not that you haven't tried. You've tried so many times and you've gotten the exact same result every time you've tried. You're still doing the same thing.
That's so good. I love that. And number 3 is, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
I'll do Helen Keller's "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing."
That's good. I like it. All right. So you run into someone in a coffee shop. They're like, Alex, that was great. I'm doing this victory log. I'm doing this stuff, working on like, what does my audience wants, neuromarketing. And what's something that we didn't touch on today that you just think, you just really want to leave our listeners with?
You need to be filling your brain with people that are where you want to be, and figuring out how that's actually going to not only benefit you, but benefit them. So whether it's signing up, whether it's buying somebody's book, or whether it's supporting them by following them on Instagram and commenting on everything, or whether it's following them on Twitter and engaging and sharing and tagging them. Everybody wants to just consume, but never really give back to the people that have allowed them to grow. And for the people that are out there, they may do it. Like, we put out a $27 a month newsletter. And the amount of word of mouth that's given my business has been insane. But it's because we framed it at the beginning like, hey, if this is bringing you value, just share it. Just literally take that edition. We'll send you another one for free if you shared it out with somebody. It's physically print. We don't do electronic versions of them. So it's like, if you wrote a ton of notes in it and you want to give somebody another one for free, just let us know and we'll send you one. That's awesome. Because they need to be able to pass that information along and be able to actually digest it and bring it back. But I would say, if you found a mentor that, like Andy Frisella and Ed Milet, for example, with Arate, it's very rare that I don't find a way to pass their information along. I can't tell you how many times I've paid for somebody's 75 hard app just to get them started, or have given them Ed's book. I mean, I've got 15 copies in a box over there that I've just given out to people, right? And for me, that's my way of supporting my mentors around everything they've been able to give back to me. I don't see a lot of people continuing to do that. And even though Ed is extremely wealthy, Andy's extremely wealthy, they don't need the money that comes from the 15 or 20 books that we've been able to pass out in just the last month alone. It's that good faith out there towards them that I know will come back. Because if my mentors are continuing to win, they're going to learn, they're going to develop, they're going to see new things that I don't see yet, because they are those people that are 15, 20, 30 years down the road from where I am, but they're giving back to me by showing me those pitfalls, showing me how to avoid these ins and outs that come with business and how you can continue. But if they're not looking out for those because they're discouraged about their growth, I'm not going to see it come back to me.
That's so good. Oh, man, I got a lot of that. That's very cool. Well, guys, I know you got a lot of value from today's episode for sure. We'll have all of Alex's information in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to him. He's amazing, super helpful. Let's go out there, guys. Let's change the world one starfish or one person at a time. If together we can change one life at a time, together we can change the world. Thank you so much for being on, Alex.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.